Hello and welcome to our discussion about transforming modern masculinity. I'm Jane Robertson from Frog Systems, provider of the employee wellbeing streaming service Ashia. Today we're discussing how our definition of masculinity has changed, the pressures that men are under in a rapidly changing world, and how to encourage men to embrace authenticity and find strength in being more open. We have three wonderful guests from the world of rugby union who've all been on their own personal journeys over the last few years. Craig White is one of the world's top rugby union conditioning coaches, working with Wales, Ireland, the British Lions, and many of the emerging nations, most recently taking Chile to their first World Cup. And outside of rugby, Craig has formed the organisation Men Without Masks, bringing men together to learn from each other, to grow and find purpose. Thanks for joining us, Craig. Donnie Macfadyen pushed his body to the limit, playing openside flanker for Scotland and winning over 100 caps for Glasgow Warriors. And since retiring through injury, Donnie has spoken about the challenges that he's faced around his identity as a man and what the future would hold as he left a place of routine, structure and support. And South African-born Wales international and Newport Dragons and Scarlets prop Rhys Thomas suffered a career-ending heart attack, which led to real struggles with his mental health and dependency on alcohol. He's on the heart transplant waiting list, and he uses his experiences to speak out about men's mental health and has become a breathwork practitioner to help people with their well-being. Welcome, guys. Thanks so much for joining us today. And to our audience, obviously, if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask the panel, please do post them in the comments, and we'll get to them as we go through our conversation. But guys, particularly, I'd like to just start really by getting you to sort of introduce yourselves in a bit more detail than I've done there. And also just how your experiences have really changed the way that you maybe think about masculinity. Craig, perhaps I could start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. So we kind of dive straight in, and as we're talking about masculinity, I can only talk about my own experience. I can also talk about what I see in the work I do, but really, my reference is my own experience. And I was raised in Wigan on a council estate, and I was raised by a family that didn't really know how to communicate well. It was very passive aggressive. The town I grew up in had this expectation that, or should I say the council estate where I grew up, there was an expectation that to be a man, you had to be a typical tough guy. You had to play some kind of sport. You didn't show your feelings. In my own living room, it wasn't a place where we could show any emotion. I was slapped for being angry. I was shamed for trying to cry. I was bullied at school. I was bullied within the house, and that added to my mother's quest to turn me into this warrior that could protect himself. And obviously, then we go to school. We learn how to logically think and think in linear ways. So, cut a long story short, and we can get into layers of this as we move on. I and all of my friends and all the people that I knew growing up as men were raised to be tough, raised to not show feelings, raised to lead with our thinking mind. Unfortunately, I was also raised to disrespect women. I was raised to objectify women. As a little boy, we don't have this capacity to say anything wrong to mom or to dad, otherwise we get punished. So I grew up with a lot of repressed anger inside of me, and luckily I could channel that through rugby because I played rugby at a pretty high level, rugby league, and I was okay with my male friends, and I was okay around men, but I wasn't okay around women. And what I didn't realize is that I was scared of women. I was scared of being around women. I didn't know how to relate to women because nobody ever showed me how to relate to a woman. And because of that, which I didn't know at the time, because of the fear around being with women, the only way I knew how to relate to a woman was to objectify them, to dominate them, to be in relationship, and I win, I lose, Mr. Know-it-all. And I see that even now today in the majority of men that I work with. We've been so conditioned to lead with our thinking mind, our controlling, thinking, ultra safe mind. And on one hand, it's a shame that there's still so much violence around women. But on the other hand, hey, no one showed us how to relate. No one ever showed us the domain of feelings and the domain of non-linear ways of thinking and spontaneity and authentic playfulness. You know, even the world at large today, if only the men that are in charge of these huge organizations and armies and governments, instead of trying to prove each other wrong and be at war with each other, if only they knew how to connect with their own feelings, maybe the solution to freedom in conflict is to cry together and to grieve together. But we don't know how to do that. And a huge part of my own journey, a huge part has been cutting through the bullshit, removing my masks, and reclaiming those repressed feelings that I couldn't show growing up, and even getting in touch with the woman inside of me and exploring different ways of thinking and feeling. And more than anything, what's been the most challenging for me, but the greatest area of growth, is to leaning into the difficulties of intimate relationships over and over again, which a lot of men still run away from or they fight with. So I guess in summary, what I wanted to say is we've been ruled to lead with our thinking mind, and no one showed us how to feel and the wisdom of feelings and the wisdom of intimate relationships. And I think more than ever before, we're called into that relational space. And in a nutshell, that's what I do with my work now. I teach men how to feel safe enough to remove the mask, go into what was repressed growing up, be liberated from that, which takes courage, and then change the script of your life and relate differently to yourself, your partner, your wife, your mother, your father, and your sons and your daughters.
Thanks, Craig. Gosh, there's a lot to unpick there, that's for sure. Donnie, I mean, you know, talking about what Craig's learned, I mean, you know, obviously we similar too, but, you know, the sudden change in your life, which you had, having to retire early, and then trying to unpack the feelings that you had. Do you think you've learned that masculinity doesn't have to be the way that you'd been conditioned when you were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, first of all, it's an honor to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. And it's great to see Craig and Rhys again. So I was obviously thinking about this a lot coming into this call today. And as you mentioned in the kind of intro to me, my transition out of rugby involved a pretty kind of hefty identity crisis. And I think as far as the context of today's conversation goes, a huge bit of that was also like a real crisis about like, what does it mean to be a man? And that played a huge part in it. So it's something that I'm fascinated in. It's something I think is really important. Certainly not in Craig and Rhys's kind of league with this sort of stuff. As Craig said, I'm an expert in my own experience. So I think it's a really powerful thing to be able to share vulnerably about what that was like for you, because I think I felt really lost with it. Like I felt like it seemed like it should be really important, but I also was a bit really confused about like what does good look like? What does success look like? It mattered to me, but I was just really kind of lost with it. And it's a sort of situation where you are maybe being told that a modern man should be vulnerable, and then in the next sentence you're being told to man up, and just how confusing that was for me, because this is something I continue to work on. I'm quite a black and white thinker. Like certainty makes me feel secure. So it was a bit like, how can I kind of like how can I populate both of those spaces? How can I be this traditional man, but also be this modern man at the same time. And I found that really, really difficult. So that's been a huge part of the last 10 years of my life is asking questions about that stuff. So yeah, no, it's as I said, a real honour to be here today.
Oh, thank you, Donnie, and we're delighted to have you as part of the panel. Rhys, your sort of views, how have your views changed? I mean, you've had, you know, an incredibly sort of tough time, dark periods where you were really, really struggling. But, you know, we see this, you know, smiling guy looking back through the screen at us. I'm sure life isn't, you know, completely up all the time for you, but how have you sort of changed your vision of who you are as a man?
Yeah, and I think it's like Donnie just said, you know, thank you. It is, again, grateful for being given this platform and being on this stage with you, Jane, and obviously two great men in Craig and Donnie. So just start with that point. But I think for me as well, in so many ways, I was brought up in South Africa, a really masculine type environment, very sport driven, very competitive. And I think from a young age, I was really trying to be seen. And in many ways, I could be seen because my family were very social. They tended to we were always at someone's house with a party, and all my aunts were over, or I was always over there. Or so to be seen in that, in, you know, those environments as the firstborn in my family was a challenge, you know. And I was a sensitive young man, and I just wanted a little bit more attention. I wanted to be held, seen, and heard amongst a lot of adults that were intoxicated more often than not. And I found other ways of gaining that attention. And for me, that was, you know, behaving badly. It seemed to bring a lot of attention my way, being naughty at first, you know, just to gain that type of attention and recognition. And I also then found that through sport. It was an out for me. It was something that I was good at, any kind of sport that I tended to pick up, whether it was swimming, cricket, football. I excelled in those sports initially in my early life, and it did give me the recognition of my family. They would come watch me, and it used to feel great, you know. I struggled in school my whole life. I really struggled terribly with authority. Anyone telling me what to do, I just couldn't stand it. But it always drove me on when someone said I couldn't do something. Whenever someone said I wasn't able to do something, it would like put a fire under my ass. And that's pretty much how my whole life went. I went to a boys' boarding school, and that kind of made me even more one particular way, because we in a school where it was all about playing first team rugby. It was a very big rugby school, and it was like that was the, you know, the pinnacle of being at that school was playing for the first team. So that was all I applied myself in, was just reaching that goal and putting on that red jersey. And that's what I achieved. And it came with it, you know, like just constantly around men all day, all night, all weekend. And again, like Craig said, objectifying women and, you know, seeing them as objects at a time that was just at the very beginning. You know, we were looking at, we didn't have porn on phones or anything like that. It was just more magazines. But obviously in boarding school, there's a lot of testosterone, and, you know, we were learning from ourselves. There was no one teaching us about our feelings, our emotions, our sexuality. And it kind of led to this really toxic type of, you know, creation, I suppose, that we came up with amongst ourselves. And when I left then the UK, I left South Africa and went abroad and to pursue that dream of playing rugby. And in that there, I found myself a long way from home without any support network. And in that time, I didn't really know how to conduct myself other than to learn from the people that I was, you know, brought up with, and the environments I'd found myself in the majority of my life, which for me was to have fun. And that fun was in the pubs, clubs, nightclubs, rugby clubs, partying, drinking, taking drugs. And that was predominantly, you know, what I did for the majority of my late teens. And until I was, you know, I kind of got derailed a few times with the massive amount of potential and ability I had, but then being able to control my lifestyle issues and trying to, find balance in that. And I did find balance in the short term, because I actually met a really powerful woman that was able to align me long enough that I could reach my goals, which was to play for Wales, who I married, started a family with. And then the old habits kicked in. I was quite, especially when intoxicated, narcissistic, egotistical. And that's kind of how my life played out, really, Jane. I never really reached the pinnacle of my talent and ability, purely because of my mindset, the way that I lacked any structure with value. I didn't have a moral compass as such, although I did deep down. I'd lost my way. And for me, it was just, when I eventually lost my career, exactly like Donnie said, that loss of identity, not knowing who the hell I was, feeling no self-worth. I didn't love myself at all. I had zero self-love, which led to a lot of these behaviors that I was exhibiting. And then from that point, it was kind of, I hit my rock bottom. And my rock bottom was after my heart attacks. I was reliant on on alcohol, and it led to a destruction of my family dynamic, but also my egoic self, to the point where I ended up in rehab. And it was kind of an enlightening, awakening type of moment. And from that point, it allowed me to ask the very important question of, who the hell am I? Mm-hmm. And from that point, then it also allowed me to through that unbelievable desperation and need for transformation, because I wanted to be a better dad. I felt like I'd let my kids down, and I had terribly. They'd come through some terrible trauma with the way I had lived my last 3 or 4 years. And it was having a clear why, a purpose, but also going into the depths of self-realization. Who am I? And who is, a higher power? Because I wasn't able to help myself. I needed help from something else greater than myself. So it was a journey. It was a deeper understanding. It was understanding that the way that I conducted myself in the past wasn't serving me. And now it was actually rebuilding. But now this time from a place of values, a place of integrity, a place where I didn't have to constantly look over my shoulder with shame, remorse, and guilt, but rather to look forward to goals, to manifesting, to creating a life that I want to live. And that can bring value not only to myself, but to others. And that serving element. So that's what I found myself. And it was a relentless attempt to heal very deep wounds from my past, all the way up from a young boy, from the fear of rejection and confrontation, from the fear in my adult years of failure and judgment, to then after my heart attacks, the fear of death and the unknown. So kind of navigating that and finding how fear had actually impacted and manifested in my behavior was a huge insight to how my psyche worked, to understand my darkness and to shine a light on that darkness, because it's part of me. But to also heal. And to heal meant many things for me, many different types of therapies that no one ever told me that were available to me. Because I thought therapy was just speaking therapy, when in fact it was, 12 steps of recovery, NLP, EMDR, tapping, a lot of somatic practices, then embodiment. And then eventually I found breath work, and I found a huge passion in that space because of the amount of release that I found in it. And that's what I did. I learned that, and now I help others by doing and practicing this medicine, as well as amongst other things. But it's been an incredible journey, Jane. One of immense learning, of incredible lows, but the most unimaginable highs. And a lot of it was surrendering and a deeper understanding of that we are all deeply flawed and traumatized in a society that is traumatized. And navigating that in our own way, because all of us right here on the screen even would need a different ways and means for us to access ways of healing from our own experience.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Rhys. And, oh gosh, You've all been through so much over the years, haven't you? Crikey. And Craig, you know, we've had a comment there from Sam, just sort of talking about this problem that, you know, all three of you have had at times, is this inability to express emotions. How are you helping other men to unpack this now? I know you work with not only people in the rugby world, but you work with senior executives. You bring together, you know, guys on retreats. What sort of tips and strategies do you have for those guys that you're trying to help?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Sam. I saw that. Great question. I guess there's two ways I'll answer this. The first one relates to some of the practices that Rhys has already spoken about, and the second part is relationships, which is really the domain, the laboratory of learning how to get in touch with what is inside of us and speak our truth and be courageous and vulnerable instead of trying to dominate and fix each other through the lens of our cognition. So Rhys kind of spoke a lot about the body there, you know. So the mind is a thinking apparatus, you know, the brain is a thinking apparatus. It's the home of our kind of logic and rationale, and very linear, especially the left side of the brain, a very linear way of looking at life. Safe, you know, we'll do it this way, and when we never change it, and then we'll go to there and we have a goal and we move towards that goal. The body is the home of feelings. We connect with another human being at the level of feelings. The level of logic is sometimes used to connect with people, but it doesn't really do it. It doesn't really give us a real sense of safety, belonging. I'm enjoying this connection. Let's go deeper. The body is the home of our feelings. The body keeps the score. What I mean by that is everything that's happened in your life moves in and through your body. And some of the things move in and through, and you can come back to at the present moment, and some things don't. You know, things may have happened growing up. You didn't want to feel it. Your body goes into a freeze mode, or you become hyperactive, and your body keeps everything. It keeps repressed fears. It keeps repressed anger. It stores repressed grief. It even stores repressed joy. You know, some of the men I work with, they don't allow themselves to feel joy. It's like a guilt in feeling joy. The body holds all our repressed creativity. The body holds all our potential, actually. So getting in touch with our body and learning to retrain our attention more and more so that it's in the body is the first step. Now, the ironic thing here, Sam, is that the typical man would say, if I say to the typical man, we've got to get you in your body, his head would say, what are you talking about? Because it's not something that can be understood with our cognition. It's a practice. So that's why we're seeing more than ever before, you know, embodied meditations where we're meditating on different parts of the body or the heart, breathing practices, movement practices, you know, martial arts coming back, yoga, you know, somatic therapies that involve a lot of multidirectional movements, loving kindness. There's a lot of therapists now coming out who are not just specialized at talking, because talking can keep you in loops. Somatic means the body. So pursuing some kind of somatic practice is a really beautiful way to train yourself, to retrain yourself to be safe enough in your body and safe enough to connect with your heart and to connect with the wisdom of your heart and the wisdom of your gut, because there's a brain in your heart and there's a brain in your gut. We just have to bring it online again with these beautiful somatic practices. That's the formal route. That's very much the route that I went in. I've done lots of weird and wonderful things around the world to get me out of my head and in my body. Nature, you know, the use of sound and singing, anything that involves the senses is a somatic practice. Now, the real area of growth is in relationships, but it's also where our stuff comes up, and it's where we get triggered, and it's where we either want to fight or we want to run away. You know that push-pull dynamic that we often feel in relationships. But learning through mistakes and leaning into that, for me, is where the real growth lies. Now, I would also recommend, if you are in a relationship, whenever you feel stuck or you're thinking about quitting, seek out some kind of therapy, whether it's individual therapy with a somatic practitioner or a couples therapist, preferably a somatic couples therapist. We live in a world where therapy is something that you do when you're broken, and it's a shame because there's some incredible therapists out there. I was on the edge of quitting my relationship about 14 months ago. We'd lived separately for a period of time, but something in my heart said that you're not done here, Craig. And I sought out some therapy with a mentor of mine, a guy called Dr. Robert Masters. I had 2 sessions with him. He had 2 with my partner, Sarah. We came together for 1 session where he got us to face each other and guided us. And we didn't need a second session. The vulnerability and the courage within that session to see each other clearly and grieve with each other and smile with each other and talk from the place of our feelings is a game changer.
Yeah.
But it's definitely these body practices that is the route back into our emotions. Emotions are in the body and thinking is in the head.
Yeah. Rhys, I'm just going to pick up on and thank you to the comment that's also been put about the sort of push to achieve equality in gender, and this, funnily enough, and inclusiveness. I was going to raise this with all of you actually, and perhaps I'll start with you, Rhys. But are men like you guys sort of feeling that you're unsure of themselves, under attack, because society is now so focused on gender equality, and the same in the workplace? There's a different feeling about the workplace, and it's moved in very good directions, much more equality, much more inclusiveness. But do you think there's a sort of set of men that maybe feel vulnerable and a bit insecure about that because of the way that you've talked about the 3 of you have been kind of sort of conditioned as younger men, maybe? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think the statistics would indicate there's definitely something awry, Jane. Whether it's down to that, I think maybe it has some sort of contribution, perhaps small, I imagine. I think it's a lot deeper than that, if I'm honest. I think Craig goes into this quite well. If you were to ask him about from when, how far back it started to actually to deteriorate for men from the industrialization, Craig. I think Craig will talk about it. And, I think obviously the society that we live in currently is very toxic for everyone, but also unhelpful for men. I think that men feel lost because I feel that there isn't a defined, there's not a clear definition of masculinity. I feel that men, there's a bit of a gray area because, a lot of the feminine have now become quite masculine. Women are very independent. They don't need a man to financially back them. They are very successful in their own rights. I feel that it's quite threatening for a man, actually, because maybe then they feel that they've lost their place in that dynamic. And not typically to a male with a healthy egoic identity can maybe identify that that's a good balance, actually. But for some that feel threatened by that, or it can cause issues. But I mean, it's hard to say that any one thing would be the reasoning behind it, Jane. I think it's all a contribution of societal pressure, image, expectation, our struggle with relationship, I think social media, with how we project what a successful man looks like, that maybe it's potentially being materially wealthy, looking a particular way. I think it's a very loaded question.
And those pressures, Rhys, I mean, Donnie, there's pressure to succeed and earn, there's pressure to, father children if you can, pressure to be sometimes still the main provider in the family, and that awful phrase, pressure to man up if things are getting tough. What do you hear sort of from friends and colleagues and people that you're kind of working with? As are other men feeling this too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to very quickly pick up on the point Rhys was making and the question you asked about, do men feel attacked? It's the fact that I'm always slightly nervous about commenting on this, perhaps, is testament to maybe we do feel a little bit attacked. And I've got a 17-year-old daughter who we have conversations about stuff like this. And I know from one of our conversations where we kind of landed was, and it's perhaps a kind of testament to what Rhys was saying about the kind of element of toxicity in society, is that it certainly seems to me that we seem to be in a place where we are so focused on what makes us different from each other, as opposed to maybe focusing on our shared humanity, if you like, rather than focusing on how different we are. And because we've got so much in common that doesn't seem to be being kind of recognized at the moment. But to answer your question about kind of what are other men feeling, so when you asked me to come on this, I was going through a bit of a kind of low ebb, if you like, and my instinct was, I can't do this right now. Like, I don't feel strong enough to talk confidently on this subject, but it's one of the things that I try and do. I mean, Craig said it a minute ago, but kind of lean into that discomfort, if you like. And it was really interesting because I spoke to another male friend of mine about that feeling that I had, that you'd asked me to talk about this stuff, to be vulnerable. And my instinct was, because I wasn't feeling great, I was just like, no, absolutely not. And his comment, which was, I think, spot on, was it was like, that's actually when being vulnerable has actual power. Is being able to show people that even when you're not feeling great, that's maybe the time to be courageous and be vulnerable. So that was a really interesting bit of feedback from him.
We're so grateful that you did bite the bullet, so to speak, Donnie, and join us today. And Craig, just sort of picking up on that, and also picking up on some of the comments that we're getting, is, those pressures that we've talked about, they lead to things like depression, to suicide, to gambling, to reliance on drugs and alcohol, to financial problems, relationship breakdown. So it's so important that men are able to find a way through this and to deal with those problems without maybe taking it out on everybody around them. And if you're a guy in the workplace who's facing all these pressures, you're either taking it out on your colleagues by maybe not being the best colleague or manager or CEO that you can be. You're probably taking it home as well and making your home life really terrible as well.
Yeah, just going to, I think it's Will Sarno, his comment about inclusivity and men becoming a minority. I think if I talk about the workplace, but then I'll talk about the family environment. I actually think it's just part of a shift in humanity that women are stepping up and women are getting a chance to express themselves differently, whether that's in the workplace or out of the workplace, and women are exploring opportunities vocationally that they couldn't explore before. On the flip side of that, so you see what's happening, it's kind of women are shifting towards more wholeness in terms of opportunities around this kind of workplace thinking, exercising their thinking. But men also have an opportunity to go the other way if they want. We can still go to work, but we have an opportunity to relate now and to enter into the space of the feminine, if you like. So they're both equal opportunities. The only thing I would say about the workplace and men feeling threatened is there's always polarity in everything. You know, there's two doors. There's the door of finding fault, getting angry, what about me? And there's the door of, wow, let's go through the potential here, the white door that I call, and a different opportunity. Wow, this is amazing. I can do things that I've never done before. I can learn from women. Wow, now we've got a CEO and we've got a board underneath and it's 50-50. Wow, surely that's going to lead to better decision making. So I think we still have a choice. We still have a choice whether to complain or whether to move into a new way of defining ourselves in the workplace. Now, what I would say about the relational space, the family dynamic, is if the wife, let's say it's a typical man-woman relationship, it doesn't have to be, of course, but if the wife and the husband commit to a we instead of an I and an I, then surely if there's a huge commitment to the we, you just do what's right for the family, whether that's the woman going to work or the man going to work or the man staying at home or the woman or getting a nanny. So for me, in the workspace, we have a choice. It's potentially exciting. It's a new era, but in the family, there's still the same shit is happening in the family dynamic, which is the same shit that's happening at the level of governments and war, where it's not a we, it's me against you. It's I win, you lose. It's I'll live my life, you live your life, and then we'll just connect at the level of the kids. So for me, there has to be a deeper journey into our own emotional, relational space in order to come together as a we. That's kind of my take on that.
I mean, how do you take that? I guess, how do you take that into the workplace, though? I mean, you know, we see lots of focus, you know, and we've got lots of content about it, you know, particular aspects of your well-being that maybe affect both men and women, you know, people of all gender. But you know, there are a lot of groups that meet up that are maybe women talking about some of the issues, you know, menopause, fertility, you know, having a baby, whatever it is. You don't find so many groups that men set up in the workplace around these things. And I wonder, is that something that maybe employers are missing and they should be encouraging that more?
100%. I mean, there's so much out there at the level of theory, you know, providing theoretical information in the well-being space. There's very little being done at the level of doing, practicing, actions. It's all this guy's coming in today, they'll give us a lecture on mental health. It's fucking bullshit. There's no shift, there's no transformation because nobody's doing anything. People are scared to do things. I mean, I've not done a lot of work in the corporate space, but in the work I have done with the corporate space, even committing to a Monday morning human check-in before you start to talk about goals and targets for the week is a game changer, where the different departments, they sit in a circle and they have a human check-in. How was the weekend? What went well? What's the challenge for you? What's your focus? How can we support you? Now, it takes a while to get to that level, Jane. You know, it's baby steps, and someone needs to be in there to facilitate that initially. But when we start to just remove the tables, remove the barriers, remove the notepad, remove the telephone, sit in a circle, look at each other, feel the triggers that come up when we actually look at each other, breathe into that, and build safety around, I feel safe enough to share something vulnerable here in this group. And that's how we build psychological safety, and that's how we build relationships. And it can be men, it can be women, it can be mixed. So even something as simple as that, you know, companies have huge budget for human resource, and even they employ people developers. But the people developers don't know how to truly develop authentic connection between human beings. It's all theory.
Rhys, you speak a lot, don't you, in the kind of corporate space, and particularly with, I think, schools, young men, who are destined for the workplace.
Yeah.
Do you agree that there should be a focus on this from a male perspective as well?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, like, I think it is important to package it with a story. So I'm a huge believer in a real story that is relatable, that is that you can see yourself in, with, especially when it's a man delivering vulnerably, right? I think that is impactful. But then from that point, like Craig said, unless you're backing that up with something, so that's why I very often, when I offer my packages, I do my speaking, but I also offer like a breathwork package. So then I'll come into the space and I'll facilitate a breathe. Now, not everyone's going to be able to do it. Some may not want to, but even with that, there is a contraindication. So some may not actually physically be able to do so. But it's about finding a way, like these different types of practices that you can incorporate into the breath space. Like Craig said, facilitating a circle, a men's circle. Now, we do this, having work, I helped to co-found a mental health and wellbeing charity, and we work from the education sector all the way up to corporate. And, we go in, we deliver our talk, but then we also do wellbeing days, which is a whole raft of different subjects, from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to expressive arts to So
you're having a menopausal moment like I do, Rhys.
Yeah, it's rugby was kind to me. And so, yeah, we do many different bits and bobs, but I think a lot of it also comes back to the somatic stuff. So we also, cold water dips, breathwork sessions, embodied movements. But again, it's like how much are you willing to actually invest in your staff's well-being? Because it is a lot more past the talking. Like, what is the actual doing of it? Because ultimately, yes, the environment at work, even though, you're trying to drive the culture, it may even be coming from the top. But how does that change in culture? How does it actually be transferred from talk into action? And how does that actually look in the workspace? Like, I go into these places, even very forward-thinking companies, corporate companies that are very hot on wellness. They absolutely prioritize it. And I will say, some of the ones I've worked in more recently, it is incredible, actually, that the lengths of effort they go into, like offering different types of classes regularly, whether it's yoga, breath work, but like having space somewhere for like a meditation room, which could be crossed over to a prayer room. We live in a very multicultural society. Why not have a meditation room where they offer prayer? And you can call it a prayer stroke meditation room, and somewhere that's quiet, but they can make it look nice. It takes small changes in a workspace. And like I said, culturally, it has to come from the top. The environment, when you've got people that are all going through a raft of different issues from day to day, bringing that into work with them, just slipping the old mask on. How you doing? Yeah, no, I'm fine. Guarantee you, the first thing you'll say, the answers will be, I'm okay, not bad, I'm fine. More often than not, those are the three top answers. And then, but every single answer is bollocks, because they don't mean a second of it. So, but how in the workspace do they also show vulnerability without the threat of losing their jobs? And that's their livelihood, right? So to be completely vulnerable and to lead by speaking truth, your truth, without repercussion. So like, to be vulnerable, say something, but then it costs you your job, instantly you lose everyone. And no one will ever talk about anything ever again in the workspace. Promise you, game over right there. So it's any office in the land right now, Jane, you go to, there are people that are in crisis, huge crisis, and you will never know. We are the most fantastic actors on earth, I promise you. So it's about genuinely, wanting to change, but how do we implement it at a level that is sustainable, but also impactful, but that incorporates somatic as well as the understanding of why we're doing it.
Yeah. Donnie, you were talking about this sort of, struggle that you had about whether to come on and be vulnerable. And as Rhys said there, and as Craig has alluded to, we need senior men in the workplace to speak about this stuff, don't we? It's all well and good us speaking about it, but if your management team aren't bought into this and aren't being honest about, some of the struggles that they find, it's not going to work. And actually, there has been a trend in the last few years certainly in financial services. I've seen a number of sort of senior men speak out and talk about the issues. It might not be about what they've gone through personally. It might be something that one of their children has gone through and they've gone through as a family. But it's so important, Donnie, isn't it, just to be open and tell these personal stories and that kind of share that lived experience right from the top.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, leadership is something that fascinates me. It's a passion of mine, and certainly one of the lessons I've learned from leadership is the power of being vulnerable. And to kind of echo what both Craig and Rhys have said, is that coming from the top makes a massive impact. I mean, I'm not talking about in kind of my experience being in big corporate settings, but in smaller settings, just that courage to go, right, everyone's looking for connection here. We're all looking for safety. We're looking for safety and direction from our leaders. So as a leader, what I can do is I can step into the middle, if you like. I can be vulnerable, and then it's like an open invitation to the other person. It's up to you. You can meet me there, and just the connection and the kind of the value that there is in that is huge. But it has to come from the top. It can't be forced from the bottom, if you like. So yeah, it's one of the things. As I said, it's an incredibly powerful tool, which sounds a bit calculated, but it's still genuine human connection. Like, it needs to be authentic. It can't be faked. But it's an incredibly powerful leadership tool. And I'm not involved in rugby anymore, but I would be fascinated to know from the other guys whether or not that is something that is perhaps coming into the game. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't really around when I played, but that was a good kind of 12 years ago.
That leads me into Craig. I was just going to ask you the similar thing, actually, because I was looking, I think you worked with Warren Gatland, didn't you? The legendary All Blacks coach. And one of the All Blacks values is, better men make better All Blacks. But, has that always been the case? Has the world of rugby changed along with society? I don't know.
It's not always been the case. And I can only speak from my own experience. One of my clients is the head coach of Wigan Rugby League, Matty Pete. And if any CEOs that are watching this and they want to see how an organisation has created immense safety, honesty, courage, support, challenge and love, and how he's managed to create a family that extends not only from the rugby team, it extends out to the cleaners and the decorators and the community staff and the women on the ticket desk. He's really managed to create a real safe environment. So it is possible, Jane. It's a bit trickier though when you have a company with men and women working in the same environments, because it's a very general comment here, but our stuff, most of our stuff as men gets triggered when a woman is present. Most of a woman's stuff gets triggered when a man is present. So it requires a little bit more sensitivity. But hey, that's where the juice is. That's where the opportunity is. It requires a bit more courage, but courage builds connection. That is the ultimate mantra that any organization should have on the wall. The courage to be vulnerable breeds connection. But hey, guess what? We're raised in a society that tells us to run away from our pain, where the real beauty is to lean into that and be honest and courageous with each other. It's hard because we're at the end of a real long patriarchal chain domination, and it is changing. But we're in a transition. But yeah, more than ever before, workplace or sport is all about relationships, Jane.
Yeah. And if you haven't got those relationships, whether it's at home or at work, there's no collaboration, there's no working together. Like you said, you're over here and the other person's over there, and never they come together. Listen, we've had fascinating chat, and I hope everybody's enjoyed it. I know we're sort of slightly running out of time here. I just wanted to get you, Craig, just to answer one of the questions Stephen had asked about how to find, if somebody is watching and they would like to maybe take up the idea of some therapy to help themselves, how do they go about that? Where's the best
Stephen, it's tricky because we live in a world of social media, don't we? We live in a world where, become a therapist in 6 weeks, become a life coach in 6 weeks. So it's a tricky environment. We are at one. We haven't got it yet, but we will have a list of recommended therapists on our Men Without Masks website in the very near future. But what I would say for now is look for a somatic therapist, someone that doesn't just ask you questions, someone that understands somatics. I would say choose someone with at least 25 years experience as well. Those would be my 2 guidelines, but it's not easy. And you might have to try a few to see if you connect, because ultimately, if you feel safe with a therapist and attuned, and he hears your story, that is half the battle. You're on your way though to transformation. You might have to try a couple first, but 25 years experience and a somatic therapist.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for all the other comments. I just want to sort of round up really with sort of coming back to this idea of modern masculinity, which is what we started with, and just whether you've got some sort of final thoughts on what that should look like. We've got a lot of men watching this discussion today. What would you like to leave them with about thoughts about how they can kind of position themselves and embrace this modern masculinity rather than be frightened of it? It's a hard question, so feel free to skirt around it if you have to. But Rhys, perhaps I could start with you. What would you like to leave everybody, men and women who've been watching this conversation today with?
So for me, it comes back to the same thing all the time. Just to be me. Authenticity is where it is at. So if you don't know who you are, it's a great point. It's a great place to start, right? To strip it all back, to understand, the masks you've worn, the walls you've built, and who is actually behind all that shit. To go back to feeling. Because ultimately, when we're authentic, we're human beings. We need to feel. And if we don't, in order to heal, we need to feel. So, and it's old stuff that's swimming around in our bodies and in our minds that's stopping us from being our authentic being. To being your true potential is yourself. But who is that self? Find that self, understand it greatly, and then just begin to do the work. It can be so beautiful, Jane. It can feel vulnerable, it can feel lonely, it can feel scary, but at the same time, if you allow yourself to find presence through whichever way you wish to do so, and there's many techniques in which to engage presence, meditation, breath work, cold water therapy, many types of somatic practices, jiu-jitsu, tai chi, qigong, yoga, exercise, expressive arts, instruments. Just find something that can make the space between thoughts. Try and find stillness in the mind. Be yourself and allow yourself to feel. Can't go wrong.
Brilliant. Donnie, follow that.
Well, I would probably echo a lot of what Rhys has just said. I suppose I could not agree more with the self-awareness bit. I don't think I can explain it as eloquently as Rhys has just done, but I would also add in, it's also, there's a self-responsibility there as well, because no one can do that apart from you. And that's a really, I think that's a really important message. I without wanting to go off on too much of a tangent, I get frustrated with a lot of kind of looking for people to blame, which I think is rife these days. But then I would also say, and this actually came to me this morning when I was thinking about this conversation, it was just this idea of, as I said right at the start, this confusion and anger that I felt about that. Like, what does it mean to be a man? Like, 1 minute I'm being told to be vulnerable, 1 minute I'm told to man up, and just how I felt that for a really, really long time I was stuck on the kind of problem side of that equation. And then it was literally just this morning when I suddenly realized actually, that's a huge opportunity to be on the solution side, because I can choose to be agile and to be self-aware enough that I can choose the time to be strong and then the time to be empathetic. I don't have to be one or the other. And I think that's an incredible opportunity. And rather than seeing it as a problem, see it as an opportunity for a huge amount of growth.
Brilliant. Thanks, Donnie. And Craig, to sort of round that all off, what would you like to leave everybody with?
Jen, I think men need to redefine what toughness is. Toughness is not having muscles. Toughness is not running ultramarathons. Toughness is not dominating. Toughness is not being aggressive and scurrying. Toughness is not fighting. You know, for me, toughness and real courage is speaking and expressing your truth in that intimate relationship space, whether that's looking at yourself in the mirror, or whether that's saying no when you mean no, saying yes when you mean yes, saying sorry when you truly mean it, and or asking for a hug when you want a hug, telling your partner that, look, I don't want to fight anymore, I've had enough, I don't want to fight. Let's create a space for emotions. Let's make anger normal and talk about it. Let's create a space where we can both cry if you want to cry. Let's not be fearful of anxiety. Let's bring it into our conversations. That is real toughness.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, all three of you, for being so incredibly honest, and I appreciate all the comments that we've had, and I hope that everybody's watching has got something to take away with them. Thank you so much. This conversation was brought to you by Frog Systems. Our wellbeing streaming service at Sheer is a complete on-demand platform full of personal stories, expert opinion, and educational webinars like this one. There are 16 channels of content covering everything from men's mental health to menopause, and there's a huge directory of signposted support and resources that can support your employees through all the different life challenges that they face. So do visit our website for more. You can sign up for a free trial if you'd like to, and do follow us on social media. Thank you so much, Craig, Donnie, Rhys. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and thank you for being so honest.
We were just warming up, weren't we?
And thank you for all the lovely comments. I think it's been very much enjoyed by everybody who's tuned in today. So thank you, everybody, for watching. And I really hope, and we all hope, that this conversation helps you to help the men in your lives. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.